Hi, my name is John Lobell. So what I'm going to talk about is digital genomic fabrication. So how do we make, and there may be four great eras: handcraft, and then the beginnings of industrial mass production. And they kind of tried to make the product look like it did when it was handcrafted. And we get to the Bauhaus, and they said, no, we should have a totally new design for an industrial era. Now, we're now entering an era of 3D printing. Each of these produces an entire culture. Think of Karl Marx talking about the material means of production, or McLuhan talking about the medium as the message. Industrial production is still with us. Here's Henry Ford's assembly, and here we are making smartphones pretty much the same way. And it was for that era that the Bauhaus came about. The Bauhaus was not making things for you to buy. They were prototypes for mass production. Now I'll pause a moment on this slide of what the Bauhaus was. So Walter Gropius observed that industry is replacing craft. Industry produced poorly designed products and put craftspeople out of business, but what they made was affordable. So Gropius said the craftsperson should become basically an industrial designer. So I'm saying that for all of design, because we architects design for something that's going to be produced industrially. Instead of making one thing to sell at a high price, the industrial designer makes a design or prototype that can be economically mass-produced and conceptually gets a small royalty on each one. So education moves from crafts and historically based art. Famously, Gropius locked up all the history of art books. No one was allowed to see them because we were making a revolutionary break from the past. And education moved to basic design and industrial materials. So you studied wood, metal, fabric, and the industrial processes whereby they were made. This changed the entire culture, but that was all 100 years ago. So what would be appropriate for today? And I'm going to get to what this is, but basically, we're manufacturing things out of nothing. So there's a model for that, DNA. 1953, Watson and Crick decoded DNA, figured out the structure. And there are 4 letters and 2 rules: A, T, G, and C. A and T can link, G and C can link, 20 parts, amino acids. That's all you need. All of life is made out of 4 letters, 2 rules, and 20 parts. Does that suggest something? So here is John Conway, who invented The Game of Life, which is a cellular automata. And this is a brilliant book about the game of life, how it developed, how it unfolded. And this is something that took forever to make. It's a glider gun. So Game of Life is in a grid, like the grid we see here, and then rules for how these black squares are going to iterate. Unfortunately, the grid's not shown here. But the difficulty here was to make something which wouldn't blow up, that this would not, eventually the whole thing becomes black or the whole thing becomes white and it just flies apart. To make something that would hang together and manufacture these guys. So that's called a glider gun. Stephen Wolfram has been working for decades with these ideas, wrote a book called A New Kind of Science. He said, I think Isaac Newton got it wrong when he said that nature uses equations to make things, to make planetary orbits, etc. It's using rules, the way we do in software. And so he explores a particular one-dimensional cellular automata, and this is one of 256 rules. Now, how complicated a thing can you make from these simple rules? So here's a simple formula. Who knows what I'm going to do next? So this is called a Mandelbrot set, developed by Mandelbrot, one of the people doing what I'm talking about. And you can zoom in on it, literally, infinitely. How far you can zoom is only limited by... The first time they did these, they did it with a pencil and graph paper. They were really happy when they got computers. But we can zoom in on this infinitely, depending upon the power of your computer. So what this suggests to me is that if you wanted to make an oak tree, you would not stick a pole in the ground, nail sticks to the pole, and glue leaves to the sticks. What would you do? Plant an acorn, let the stupid oak tree make itself. Why aren't our cell phones are smart? Why can't they make themselves? Why have all these people with tweezers trying to let the stupid things make them? Why can't we make a smartphone? We can go much more complicated than glider guns, but the problem is this is in the computer. How do we get it out of the computer into, quote unquote, the real world? And that's what Neil Gershenfeld's working on. So Gershenfeld pioneered what's called a fab lab. Think of a 3D printer. And again, a 3D printer is just a poster child for something about half the size of this room, but could then make anything. And we're going to see the significance of that in a moment. Now, to do this, he totally revolutionized computer science, rejecting Turing machines and von Neumann architecture, which is what we all use to this day, into a new kind of production which incorporates computation. The computation is in the material. So we do something on the computer, which sends it to the printer, which puts it on the paper. What if the paper did the whole thing? The acorn does the whole thing. There's no outside force telling an acorn what to do. It's all inside. And that's what he's doing. Well, how far can you go with this? Well, he's now working with Airbus to make self-assembled jumbo jets. That's how far they go. And the point is, this changes everything. So in the industrial model, you go to school to get an education, to get a skill, to get a job, to make money, to buy what you need. What if you just 3D print what you need? Skip the whole thing. Everything changes. Just the way everything changed when we went from handcraft to industrial production, now it changes again. And 3D print is, again in quotes, because this is one of his fab labs, about half the size of this room. It includes 3D printers, but other stuff. The city of Barcelona is doing it so that they want to stop importing stuff that they have to pay for and just make everything locally. Some of the people thinking this way, Carl Schuh, who gives his students 3 genes, A, B, and C, at the beginning of the semester. By the end of the year, the building has grown itself. Alicia Andrusak, who is doing biological analogies of this approach. Elena Manfredini, who's applying this to both fashion and architecture. Haresh Lalvani, this is his morphological universe. Now here, columns just like this are in the Permanent Collection Museum of Modern Art. And he makes the point that these curves do not come from, the information for the curves, do not come from the machining. It's in the material. I'll tell you the secret, it's scored. But once you've done that, the information is done at telling the material how to fold is in the material, not coming from the outside. Lockheed and Boeing are in competition with SpaceX. Lockheed and Boeing to make rockets. Lockheed and Boeing have whole supply chains to bring to them all the parts they need to make a rocket. SpaceX makes all their own. They need something, they 3D print it. This is a 3D printed rocket engine. It can handle big stresses, this emerging digital genomic age, not the Bauhaus education, one in which leaders in the field are guest faculty. We learn programming as a way of thinking, getting beyond Aristotle's 5 parts to an essay, and thinking of what you can do in terms of relating unlimited ideas in the computer, independent projects, industrial collaborations. So these are the people I've been bumping into at the conferences where I'm following this stuff, and I think they would make great visiting professors to come here. I'm envisioning a digital genomic world with new logics, new worldviews, new ways of making, new life trajectories. What you're going to do with your career totally changes. New social organization, new models of education, totally new ways of thinking. And I've been giving this lecture since 1969. And I always end it with this slide. It says Xerox on a raw egg. And then I would say, why aren't we Xeroxing our cars? Now we are.